I just want to start by talking about, I used to do youth mentoring, and particularly with at-risk, but also was involved in a cadetship program at council. And I was talking to one of my young guys one day who is from Kaikohe, and he said to me that he grew up and the water supply and where they bathed and swam was the stream next to the home. He said, I didn't know I was poor. He said, I had an amazing upbringing. So I'm going to read off notes today. Normally those that know me know I ad-lib a lot, but this is such an important topic, I wanted to make sure I stayed on the mark. So I just want to say this young man is now in Australia. He's got 2 young children of his own, and he is doing phenomenally well. And just touching on what was touched on earlier is the importance of mentoring, because if we don't get it in our direct family, you know, there is mentors and we mentor other people without even realising it sometimes. My first observation is, what are we actually talking about today? Is it tackling poverty and all the definitions that currently come with it? Or are we actually tackling the loss of hope, the lack of aspirations, the sense of not belonging, feeling no sense of value that many of our people currently carry? When we talk about poverty, I believe it is so much more than a material, physical thing. It is addressing the poverty of the soul that I truly believe lies at the core of the issue. There are many examples of young people that have grown up in an environment of not having much in the way of material things, but have had great wealth in the fact that they have been loved and encouraged. And although they may go without some things, they have experienced a rich environment in a real world. I would add that these upbringings often build our resilience, our adaptability, our gratitude, and our character. And it is this that often makes for a well-balanced and productive member of society, a person that recognises self-responsibility and the meaning of contribution. So my first challenge is to be mindful of the labels that we put on people, and that has already been touched on today. Society currently has a habit of putting people into a box. Oh, she's this, she's that. What do you expect when they grew up in that environment? We live in a time of filling in forms, ticking boxes, and meeting the criteria to get help and assistance with where it is that we want to go. When we put negative labels on our children, and this becomes hardwired, and I understand by the age of 7, our brains are hardwired, and some people say that can never be changed. I don't accept that, but changing the way that the labeling has been put on our children and the expectation in those first 7 years is often how they see the rest of the world, and they can be bloody hard to move. I believe we need to be more mindful of our vocabulary and the words we use. I recognise that there is criteria and outcomes to meet. However, we are dealing with people and communities, and their uniqueness needs to be respected. My second observation, the context in which government works in this arena, whether it be local or central, and I just want to touch on that local government in some areas has quite an impact on social activity. Our council and smaller councils don't tend to have so much. We certainly have a role in advocacy, but because of the nature of income and that sort of thing, it's not something that we do a lot in, and I would like to see more of it. We did produce a social development plan back in 2007, and not much actually ever became of that, so we need to get that off the shelf. So local and central government, it is our role at the end of the day to serve and support. I really want to emphasise that, serve and support, and I think it was touched on earlier that we have a government that leads often, whereas actually our role is to serve and support our districts and our regions and our communities and our country. If we hold this at the core of what we do, then it changes our approach, our way of thinking and our way of working with communities. If we recognise that communities generally know what's best for them and clearly goes against a one-size-fits-all policy or approach. It's not to say that this isn't done without goodwill, but my experience is it is often done as a sticking plaster rather than having a holistic approach. Change can take time, particularly if we are trying to address ingrained belief systems. And I'm talking about the negative ones, those labels. So my second challenge is, how do we truly empower and trust our communities to take charge? How do we break down this current thinking of doing it to us rather than doing it with us? From a community perspective, I believe it starts with self-responsibility and then builds to community responsibility. We need our community leaders to step up, and we need to have the hard and the brave conversations And I'm just going to make a point here today. Fantastic to see you all, but there are some faces I would have expected to see. And I'm just going to put that out there. You know, where are our community leaders today? This is such an important topic. There have been lots of wrongs. Lots of wrongs. There is a lot of anger, disappointment, loss, and despair. It goes back centuries, and not just in this country, but in many countries, and it all comes together as we are. I believe that until we address this, acknowledge that it is done, we seek the forgiveness and are able to heal and let go and then move on, we will continue to find ourselves in this cycle. We also need to be mindful of the motivators and ensure the hard yards are taken to set up activities for success. Sometimes we rush into things so much that we don't really think about ensuring how it's going to last, and are we providing the support systems to let them get through. There are plenty of examples where programs have fallen short under community leadership, and I know we've seen them here in Kaikohe. And there are often many reasons for this. However, things like patch protection, large egos and lack of collaboration should not be one of the reasons. So together, if government works alongside in partnership with our community leaders, support them with the tools, the resources, help enable them to make their stand in their own way and in their own time, I absolutely believe we will see inroads. The Far North District Council in 2015 adopted the district vision, He Whenua Rangatira, a district of sustainable prosperity and well-being. This is quite a big deal, and I don't know if you remember, those from out of town, but we had billboards around the place that had like bridges from Russell to Pai here and a university here in Kaikohe, and wind farms in the Hokianga Harbour. Caused quite a stir. But what it did is it actually took people that were, you know, moving on with their daily lives and made them stop for a minute and think, is this the future that we want? The vision, He Whenua Rangatira, is supported by 6 key values, including family, community, connecting, caring, and 9 key expectations for 2050. And I just want to add here, so we signed this off last year. Local Government New Zealand have just launched a similar discussion for New Zealand. So I was very proud because I've led this work to think, oh, we're ahead of the game on this. And when you talk about a country visioning, I couldn't be in more support. We need a vision that steps outside of whoever's in government at the time. Something that's based on our key values and principles of who we are as a country that can't be played with. So our expectations for 2050 include a great place for our families to flourish and happy, healthy, safe and purposeful people. This vision was developed from the ground up, facilitated by Council, over 2,000 people. So this was the biggest response Council's ever had to a non-legislative activity, and it was still bigger than legislated activities we do. That's how much people bought into it. We spoke to prisoners, we spoke to students. I did 40 events in 10 days of going out into the community. It was full on, and man, it was the most exciting thing I've done since I've been a councillor. It was very cool. One of the key aims is to articulate and celebrate our values as a district, strengthening our journey of who we are and where we want to go. So often when things are tough, you open your arms up and say, oh yeah, we'll encourage that economic activity, or we'll encourage that. And then 5 or 10 years down the track, you think, actually, is that what we wanted? And the thing is, we've got to be really smart. We've got some cool stuff going on up here. But there's some things I absolutely don't think we need. And if you talk about us being 20 years behind, I don't want to catch up to the rest of the world, because a lot of it is not in a good place. So where's the opportunity for us as New Zealand? Because people are coming here because they see New Zealand as a place of great things happening. But we need to make those decisions now and put that stake in the ground, because there will be some stuff happening that really scares me. And losing our environment is one of them. To achieve this vision, He Whenua Rangatira, to achieve this vision, we must come together. Central government, local government, iwi, hapu, commercial, private communities, we all have a role to play. If we are to change our story, we must recognise that we are all in this together and that we have the power collectively to make a real difference now and into the future. And it starts with me, it starts with self, it starts with recognising our value as a people and an individual. It starts with raising each other up, celebrating our diversity and not pulling each other down. It starts with community and remembering what we are actually capable of. that all parts make the whole, warts and all. I just want to finish with one other little story. So there was a scientist who took a bunch of fleas and he put them in a container. And on top of that container, he put a glass lid. Ken knows this story. And so as you know, fleas have the capacity, they're the second animal that can jump the highest for the size. So they can jump 18 centimetres, and you know how teeny tiny they are, massive. So they put them in and at first the fleas jumped and kept hitting the ceiling. And then over time, they learnt to jump only as high as the ceiling. And when he released the fleas, they went back into the community, they came back out, and they never learnt to jump, they were never able to reach their potential again. And the story goes on, you can Google this story, the story goes on that their offspring never learnt to jump to their potential. So the moral to the story is obviously we're not fleas, but current society, and it doesn't matter if it's now or 100 years ago, the society norms have put labels over us. There's a great one over the far north. If we ever want national statistics of what doesn't go well, guess what? This community often pops up in them. So if we're going to talk about tackling communities, I suggest that we need to start breaking some of those glass ceilings in our own lives and in the lives around us, is start challenging some of the norms and some of the belief systems and ask, why is this so? Because until we start asking why, we might actually find out that the reason we do some things is because it's always been done that way. Doesn't mean it's right. Sometimes it is right, but we've got to ask why. We live in a time where we're trying to cut down, I've got a 5-year-old and questions drive me nuts. But, I make an effort to answer them because I don't want to knock that out of you. So I'm just, we really need to, it's very much around that self-responsibility, it's very much around community responsibility, and it's very, very much around being brave. Because as I said, there's some really terrible things that have happened, and people have done some terrible things to each other. But until we're brave enough to talk about it and heal and be open and then move forward, I really don't believe, we've just got to be brave and do it in love and aroha.